Do you remember the movie True Spirit, the story of an Australian teenager, Jessica Watson, the youngest person ever to sail solo nonstop around the world? If you're anything like me, your first question would have been, what boat is that? And we're going to go through it today, but imagine my surprise when I found out that the boat she used was a Sparkman and Stephens and realized we have one that we can show you. Now, of course, True Spirit was a Netflix sensation about the youngest person to sail around the world, and a million things have been written about that. Jessica Watson's accomplishment is staggeringly impressive, but we're here to talk about the boat. Sparkman and Stephens gets a lot of respect in the sailing world, and for good reason. Olin Stephens II, born 1908 to 2008, was one of the most influential and prolific designers of the 20th century. After a short apprenticeship working on 6 meters, he joined forces with Drake Sparkman in 1930 to form the legendary S&S firm. During the war, Sparkman and Stephens was heavily involved with the design of craft for the military. When racing for America's Cup resumed 26 years later, his pre-war 12-meter, called Vim, was barely eliminated in the Defender trials of 1958 America's Cup. The S&S designed Freedom from 1980 was the last 12-meter to successfully defend the Cup. Olin Stephens was one of the primary figures in the development of rating rules too, from CCA, IOR to IMS. More on that in a minute. Sailboat data lists 242 accredited sailboats to Sparkman and Stephens' design brand. Their designs have won most of the major international yacht races that you can think of, like America's Cup, for decades, including a string of victories at Fastnet in the Sydney to Hobart, as well as winning twice the Whitbread Round the World race. The boat in True Spirit, Ella's Pink Lady, is a Sparkman and Stephens design number 1959. All of their designs had numbers, which makes this all a lot easier. 1959 was drawn to be a 34-foot masthead sloop weighing just under 10,000 pounds, light for a 34-foot with a 10-foot beam. These were first built in the UK in 1968, but the keen eye will realize that this S&S 34 is not exactly like the boat from the movie. The hull is right, but the coach top is all wrong. In the original design, the boat has 2 big windows and 2 small windows, and a coach top that kicks up just after the mast to make the companionway taller. The movie boat coach top is all one level, with the hard Dodger added, of course. And the movie boat has 4 equal size windows. So the movie boat has a different coach top than Sparkman and Stephens' design 1959. To make matters worse, the 4-window movie boat is also different than footage of Jessica's real boat, seen here with 5 windows. So the real boat has 5 windows and a flat coach top, which brings me to a design I think her boat actually is. Apart from the original Sparkman and Stephens 1959, there was a special one built in Australia by Swarbrick and Swarbrick. And yes, Swarbrick and Swarbrick were building boats designed by Sparkman and Stephens. That's a lot of S and S's. Anyway, when Swarbrick bought the rights to build the S&S 1959 design, they changed the coach top to a 5-window single-level design, which is a dead ringer for the real version of Jessica's boat before the hard Dodger was added. I'm not sure who did the coach top for the movie, but it is not the same as the real boat. And I know I may be the only one who cares. I'd also like to draw attention to the hull here. We call this part tumble home, where the hips of the hull stick out way past the width of the rub rail. This makes docking these boats without scratching the paint ridiculously hard, but it's there for a reason. These boats were designed in the time of IOR rule, which Olin Stephens had a hand in writing. Interesting that he would be designing boats to compete against the racing rules that he helped to write. Maybe a conflict there. Anyway, IOR design was all about designing boats to be as fast as possible, but to measure as slow as possible against the rules of the day. They weren't designing boats to be the best boat that the boat could be. They were designing them to look slow when measured, but be extremely fast when you race them. This is a big part of the Fastnet disaster and a lot of other unstable boats going upside down in big storms. IOR was later removed as a rule set and replaced, which changed how designers were drawing boats. So these old IOR fat in the middle and tiny on each end boats, while most find them beautiful, they sail like a stabbed rat at 15 degrees a heel, but can become unstable in big seas. They were designed to sail with all that extra hip in the water for more wetted surface. Dead slow standing upright, but a rocket when heeled over. Anyway, we don't have a Sparkman and Stephens 1959 to show you today. There are very few left in the world, as they were made in the 60s. What we do have is a Sparkman and Stephens design number 2166. This is the younger brother that came 10 years later and is eerily similar in design. The 2166 is basically the same boat with some minor adjustments, still in the IOR era. And this isn't just any 2166, it's mine. And I'll take you on a tour with one disclaimer. In this filming, she's halfway through a full restoration. The outside's been painted. She still gets raced very frequently and sailed hard before this video, and she was put away a mess. You'll see a lot of glass work on the top sides because the next phase is a full topsides paint job. Let's have a look. This is the IOR era. Pinched sterns, wide hips, and tumble home, making the boat look like a pregnant snake. The 2166 is 35'5" overall, with overhangs so big she loses 9 feet before reaching the water. 9 feet. The 2166 is the same keel as Jessica's boat, the same skeg and rudder, and weighs about the same as the Swarbrick version of the boat, about 13,000 pounds in this case. The beam of the 2166 is stretched slightly from 10 feet to 10.3. Foredecks are wide and unintrusive, and in my boat's case, she's fully rigged to fly a symmetrical spinnaker right from the factory. As we saw Jessica's boat upside down in the movie, it didn't lose its mass, which likely owes itself to being keel stepped. Chain plates are well outboard and go through the glasswork to bulkheads or knees, fairly well tabbed to the hull on the inside, also available for inspection in the lockers. Winches aft are Lumar 40s for primaries, and the spinnaker gets a second set of Lumar 30s just aft. The cockpit sits 6 people fairly easily, and in the case of the 2166, steering is given by an Edson wheel chain and cable system. Side decks are wide and easy to traverse with a gentle slope outboard for water runoff. Note the fender placement though as the tumble home, because it's always the first thing to hit the dock. This boat was built in 1980 and came factory with a Loran long-range navigation system. Obviously I've taken this boat from the Great Lakes down to the islands and back, so it's equipped with 550 watts of solar built out over the cockpit, but does not have davits. It's my opinion that boats of less than about 15,000 pounds should not have davits. It is of course just an opinion, but with the extra weight hanging off the back of a boat this light, it would deteriorate the sailing characteristics enough that I opted not to have davits at all. My 10-foot rib fits up on deck. Single-handed sailing on this is relatively easy too. It's a 35-footer. I hear a lot of folks who get worried about single-handing anything over 30 feet, but I can attest, once you're out and away from the dock, the boat might as well be 60 feet long because it really doesn't matter out in the sea. Headed up on deck, we note the full-length tow rail, making it easy to mount and fasten things everywhere, and the factory spinnaker pole sitting in its mounts on the forward deck. Body work well underway as I epoxy and glass any scratch, nick, or ding in the topsides, including repairing all the stress cracks before a full topside paint job. These decks are balsa core, and water intrusion has been well looked after on this boat. The windlass was something I added to support the use of the 55-pound Rockna, usually on the roller when I go anywhere outside my home lake. This 33-pound Bruce does a great job for day trips and much easier to manage than the Rockna when it's not needed. The 140 cruising Jenny is on a profurl that gets the job done, and the locker happily stores 150 feet of 5/16 chain as well as another 200 feet of 1-inch nylon. This boat rode out the tail end of a hurricane on the Rockna and this ground tackle without an issue. Stanchions on the 2166 are high and solid, but no gate was provided by the manufacturer in 1980 for boarding. The rig is a keel-stepped single spreader with a mainsail height of around 38 feet off the deck for a total air draft of well over 40 feet. With the 4-foot antenna on top, it was closing in on 50 feet to get under the bridges on the ICW. This boat happens to be equipped with a stack pack and lazy jacks and a full batten main with 3 reefs, which have all been well used at different times out in the ocean. Headed inside, we're treated to my mess, but such is the life of a boat that's raced and day sailed regularly. The bed mattress tops have been removed and everything's being replaced. Gone is the L-shaped settee to port, replaced with a day bed. The nav station's to starboard in front of a quarter berth of about 7 feet, which makes a good seagoing berth to hide in when you're off watch. All the teak and mahogany is well weathered in here and it shows its age in miles, but the upholstery's all original. Headed forward, the 30-gallon factory water tank's located under the starboard settee, and a large fold-down and flip-out tables from the factory bolted to the forward bulkhead. A hanging locker, now equipped with shelves and a set of drawers, is to starboard, headed into the V berth, which is small, and while it's usable, I find it too cramped for me to sleep in. It remains empty, with already enough weight and anchor chain at this end of the boat. Storage here is plentiful, but seldom used. The heads to port, and while tight, well used from several long-distance voyages. The Jabsco was replaced with a Nature's Head many years ago, a decision I would make again and again. The Nature's Head fits well in here, but it makes it tight and harder to shower. The 2166 makes good use of its space despite its fairly narrow beam of 10.3 feet. Storage is plentiful, and despite being an older cave-style cabin of a boat, a lot of light still gets in, and ventilation is fairly good with all the hatches open. The galley's L-shaped with a 2-burner propane stove and oven, upgraded to a larger sink, and the fridge freezer located in the middle with a compressor outside in the lazarette. The party piece of this particular boat is the repowered Volvo with only about 2,000 hours on it. The MD 2030 makes 27 horsepower and has been adequate even in the roughest ocean inlets, but it sips fuel otherwise, running very efficiently and quiet. What's very unique about this Sparkman and Stephens design number 2166 is that it came with a prop shaft driven configuration or a sail drive. In 1980, a sail drive, which is what this boat is, a Volvo S120 sail drive, most commonly used in big catamarans, and it found its way into an 80s IOR boat for some reason. I'll never complain because I don't have to deal with stuffing boxes or engine alignment. Instead, I have to change a large seal every 10 years, which involves pulling the sail drive out. It takes me an afternoon to do that job, but it's well worth the security once a decade. Which brings me to my point in all this. These old Sparkman and Stephens boats, we know they're well made, we know they sail incredibly well. The one Jessica used to round the planet, design number 1959, has been used by a lot of people, not just her, to circumnavigate, despite it being from the 60s. My boat, design 2166, owing its heritage to the same designer, are some seriously capable boats. You won't get a sugar scoop or an aft cabin, but you are getting something kind of special. Something that people choose to use to go around the planet by themselves because they're just big enough to do it, but still small enough that you could do it alone. And they aren't expensive. You can find one for less than 20 grand if you look hard enough. And provided the glasswork is still in good shape, solid core and good bulkheads, they have a lot of miles left in them. What do you think of these older boats? Would you sail one out in the ocean? Have you? Love to hear from you in the comments, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you guys next time.